And in the aftermath of the Treaty of Tilsit, with virtually all of the French continent either allied with him, like Austria, Prussia, and Russia, or under his control, like the Kingdom of Italy, like the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, like the Kingdom of the Rhine, Spain, and France. With controlling all the continent now, he'll begin what's known as the Continental System. Now, the Continental System will be his attempt to defeat Britain through economic warfare. So Napoleon will prevent any country from trading with Britain. And so he thinks he'll starve out the British economy by cutting off their trade with Europe. Of course, Britain has the dominant navy, and at the Battle of Trafalgar, a naval battle, the British will defeat the French navy, and therefore the British will control the seas. So the British are still able to trade with their colonies, with North America, with India, with South America. The British are still able to trade with all those areas, and the British will blockade Europe from trading with those areas. So Britain will create a blockade that will prevent France from trading with the rest of the world. So the Continental System is designed to starve out the British. It's also designed to get France to be able to be the center of the European economy. And so all sorts of tariffs will be put on things that will benefit French goods and allow French goods to be sold elsewhere. But it will make it hard for the goods produced in Austria or Italy to be sold in France. And so the goal will be to sort of rearrange the French economy so that France is the center of the economy, selling things and exporting things to the other parts of Europe, whereas the other parts of Europe will not be able to sell things to France. Now, not being able to trade with Britain and these internal tariffs that hurt these areas but help France creates a lot of resentment against the Continental System and against Napoleon. Also, Napoleon moving into these territories creates nationalist resentment against the French armies that are controlling these areas and the French people that are put in charge of these areas. One of those areas of resistance, of nationalist resistance to the French, is in Spain, where there's the Peninsular War. In Spain, basically, Spanish will begin a guerrilla war against the French government. A guerrilla war is one in which people are not in uniform, but regular civilian-clothed people are sort of attacking troops, and so the troops can't recognize who's the enemy and who's not. So there will be an ongoing guerrilla war in Spain, and this will be sort of Napoleon's Vietnam, right? He'll get dragged down in it. His army will, be fighting it through most of his leadership. There's also resistance to his control in Germany, amongst the German people, so a sense of German nationalism begins to form. German people saying, wait, why are the French controlling us? Why are the Germans controlled by this foreign leader with his foreign ideas and his foreign government? The Germans need to develop a strong nation for themselves that represents German cultural values, not French ones. And finally, there will be resistance in Russia. Alexander I will decide that he wants to end the Continental System and wants to allow Russia to trade with Britain. So he decides to open up trade with Britain again. And Napoleon doesn't like this, so Napoleon decides that he's going to go to war against Russia in 1812. And so Napoleon will take his grand army and march it into Russia in the Russian invasion. And of course, if you remember, that grand army is destroyed in that winter of 1812. Why? The Russians, A, practice the scorched earth policy, in which they basically burn everything so that Napoleon's troops can't get food that they were expecting to be able to get. When Napoleon gets to Moscow, the Russians burn down Moscow, the old capital. They burn it down instead of allowing Napoleon and his troops to have a safe place to stay for the winter, and instead of allowing them to have supplies and provisions to keep them alive. And so the cold winter, of course, also has a huge effect on the health of Napoleon's troops. Many of them are not ready for it. They do not have the protection against the winter cold, and so they freeze to death or die of starvation. And so the 1812 Russian invasion is a complete debacle. Napoleon returns home without his grand army. Something like over 3/4 of it dies. So now that Napoleon's weak, another alliance is formed. This will be known as the Quadruple Alliance. And there's been alliances against Napoleon, and they've come and gone. And for a brief period of time, Britain had a peace deal with Napoleon, but more or less, Britain's been fighting against France for a long time. Austria's been defeated again and again and again by Napoleon, 4 times in fact. But whenever they think there's another chance to get back at him, they go to war at him again. And so now this quadruple alliance will include Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Britain against France. Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Britain against France. And basically, when the invasion of Russia fails, Napoleon's army is small. Therefore, Austria and Prussia, who had been conquered by Napoleon, now realize that this is their chance to defeat Napoleon, so they decide to join this alliance against him. And so, of course, Napoleon is eventually defeated in 1814. And he is exiled to Elba, which is this island off of the Italian coast. And while he's exiled in Elba, there will be the Congress of Vienna. And the Congress of Vienna will be the meeting of this quadruple alliance, the meeting of France, Russia, Austria, and Britain, in order to figure out what Europe will look like after Napoleon came through and changed everything. But Napoleon will return to France for 100 days. He'll reclaim his leadership. He'll be viewed as a hero by many French, and so they'll rejoin his army. And so Napoleon will go on reclaim the French territory, and the Quadruple Alliance will have to intervene. And so he'll be stopped at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. And so this Battle of Waterloo will end the 100 days of Napoleon's return. He will be captured, and now he'll be forced into exile at St. Helena. And the Congress of Vienna will establish what's known as the principle of legitimacy. And the principle of legitimacy will say that the legitimate leaders of Europe are those from the noble families that were in charge before the war. Those from the noble families that were in charge before Napoleon came through and the revolutionary actions. And so who is the representative of the royal family from before the French Revolution? The Bourbon king, now Louis XVIII, who was Louis XVI's brother, who fled into exile in order to protect himself. He was an émigré, and so he will now be the new king of France. So we began with the king being overthrown, we end with the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy, and the Congress of Vienna, which will be a relatively conservative Congress led by Prince Metternich of Austria, and they will look to prevent the Napoleonic revolutionary liberal ideas from upsetting the European continent in the future. And so we'll pick up there with the 19th century after 1815 in our next session.